Welcome to the Big Four Accounting Firms podcast, brought to you by big4accountingfirms.com and the Big Four Accounting Firms YouTube channel. Before we get started, just wanted to remind everybody to support us if you have a chance or if you can. Even $1 helps, and we have a link in the description to a website called Buy Me a Coffee. It's just a way to donate to us and support us. Again, any amount is helpful so that we can keep putting out content. And there's also other ways for you to support us in the show notes to this podcast or on YouTube in the description. What's up, everybody? In today's podcast, I wanted to cover a couple of things, not necessarily news related, but still wanted to cover them. The first was corporate communication, or Big Four communication in the Big Four, and the various modes that there are to communicate, because it's very hard sometimes to figure out which way is the best way to communicate, because there's so many ways to communicate now. There's email, there's whatever chat option that you have at your Big Four company, whether it's Google or Microsoft Teams or some other format of how to chat. And I know there's other companies out there that use Slack and things like that. Used to be, IBM that used to have same time and stuff like that. Maybe some places still do, but I don't know many places that still use IBM. But there's that, and then there's the virtual meeting software where you can typically just jump into a quick call, and a lot of young people like to do that. I don't necessarily like doing that, but I guess that's what I wanted to discuss, was that there's various forms of communication out there. So you have to understand how to use each, or when to use each, and how to use them with your boss. You have to figure out what they like doing. You can't just press your way on top of theirs, because especially if they're like an older professional, you don't want to use that chat feature unless they like using it. If it's a partner, you don't necessarily want to use the chat feature for them. But one thing you'll learn too at the Big Four accounting firms is a lot of the partners never log on to their computers. I know that sounds kind of weird, but a lot of them don't. And if they do, they don't get on the software that shows their availability. A lot of them don't. Some of them do, don't get me wrong. And some partners are very, very diligent, but others just don't like getting on software. And so you're going to have to use the telephone sometimes, right, to just call them, or you might set up a conference call, or they might be willing to do a virtual meeting, but I'm not sure if all partners are completely there yet. But I mean, I'm sure partners in large are probably hard to get a hold of now because of the whole work from home, for the most part, model. It used to be a lot when I first started where you would schedule a meeting, you go in the partner's office. Now that's not always possible now. So you do have to schedule a call in virtual meetings, and I'm sure some of them are very good, but I'm sure for partners it's a lot easier to email. But for a lot of people young in their career, you don't really have to worry about emailing or connecting with the partner as much as your other people, but you still need to figure out which way is the best way to communicate. And it's also a good way to gauge where you are in your career. If the person above you is constantly pinging you to get a hold of you, doesn't let you be independent, it's always trying to track you down, then maybe you don't want to work with that person either. So, but learning the communication style of your group and how they communicate versus how you communicate is very important. Like, you don't want to enjoy communicating a certain way and other people in your group don't do that at all, because then you won't grow. For example, if you really need to connect virtually to share your screen and your group doesn't want to do that, then you're not going to fit in, you're not going to learn that much. But you need to be cognizant of what people like to do, and the way you can do that is like figure out how they respond the best, how you get the best responses. But also sometimes you need to send an email with a long list of items, and that's just the best way to do it, is through email. So there's just various forms of corporate communication, and it's becoming more important because it used to be, you used to do a lot of stuff in person, and you can sit in a person's office with them and have your pen and pad and go through things. Maybe even you had a whiteboard, and you could scribble down your thoughts on there, put org charts, put details, but you can't do that anymore. And I know there's software that does that, but it's just not the same. So things are changing, and learning corporate communication and how to get your thoughts across in a timely and efficient manner is becoming more and more important. And so that's just something I wanted to cover today. But also another thing I saw on a Twitter account that I follow, I think it's Excel Humor, and they tweeted today, the best thing young people can do earlier in their careers is to learn Excel. I don't know what they mean by young people. I guess they mean accountants. Because I don't think Excel is good for everybody to learn. Like if you work at Starbucks or something, Excel isn't going to really help you out. But I tweeted that, and I said, I think corporate politics is better, because in the big four accounting firms, I think it really is good to learn Excel early in your career. But the big four is not really good at teaching you Excel unless you're like under an Excel master. But if you can get really good at Excel, then yes, if you learn pivot tables, VLOOKUPs, and then move that into Alteryx and UiPath and other tools, then you will move very fast. But a better way to move fast is learning corporate politics, learning how to take credit for things. And that was something else I was thinking about in the big four accounting firms, is that it's not necessarily what you accomplish. It's more of how you take credit for it. Because I was thinking about the politics going on in the world right now with ESG and diversity, and how that's soon going to be a mandatory requirement for a lot of large companies, and how the big four is very integral into implementing those, because it means more revenue for them. They don't really care about these issues. They care about earning more revenue, and the more requirements or disclosures in a 10K or a public filing, the more money they're going to make. But that's not going to stop them. That's not going to stop them from not doing it themselves. So the big four accounting firms speak about diversity, but you look at their board, you look at their diversity officers. A lot of times their diversity officers aren't even diverse themselves. So, but they take credit for things like diversity and ESG when they don't do it themselves. And I say all that to say that corporate politics is very important, and learning how to play the game, learning how to take credit when you don't necessarily do that much. And I think that's why the big four accounting firms face a lot of ethical problems and regulations themselves, because they become very good at taking credit for minimal amounts of work. And even if you're a whiz kid or a genius and you can master Excel and you can help engagements, like I was thinking about how good it would be to learn Excel, and a good way for the big four to do that is to like put different people on a bunch of different engagements and use Excel in different ways. But they're not going to let you do that, and they don't care enough to improve their engagements, because it just means more cost. It means you're going to reduce the margin on the engagement, so they're not going to really do that. But that doesn't mean they won't take credit for saying that they're implementing technology so they can show their clients. They'll still take credit for it, and they'll still not improve that much. So to me, I think in the big four accounting firms, corporate politics and learning to play the game is better. And one of the most essential ways to do that is to take credit for whatever you do. And you do that by actually talking about the good job you do. And you don't just sit behind the scenes typing away in Excel. You have to take credit for what you do. You have to interact with people and let them know you. But those are the topics I wanted to cover today. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast, stay up to date, and support us through the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes to this podcast if you can. Thanks for listening.